Ready to be a landlord?
I don't know, I'm not quite sure.
Well, a recent poll said that about 2/3 of sellers were thinking about keeping their house
Sure.
as they go to buy their new home.
I've heard that a lot with those low interest rates that we had a few years back. That is happening for sure.
And that's a major factor. If someone's paying 2.5%, 3% on their existing home, they're like, hey, maybe I can keep it and go to the new house, pay the 6 or 7%, but keep my old one at 3% and make some money.
Sure, sounds like a good plan.
So let's dive into some of the details that you might want to consider if you're in this position. I'm Jim.
I'm Vickie.
And we're with the Bishop team here in Orange County, California. So the first thing that you need to consider is your financial ability to do what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
A lender is generally going to assume about a 25% vacancy rate, which is probably conservative, but it's a conversation you need to have with the lender. Can you keep your existing debt and add new debt, assuming you're financing,
right,
and still qualify for the new home? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, and that depends on your financial situation.
So that would be the first thing. A second thing to consider is the condition of the home, right?
True. So just like when buying a home, the condition matters. Same thing with rental. A nicely upgraded home will rent for more, but if you put a lot of detail into the home, keep in mind that a tenant is generally not going to maintain it at the same level you do. So are you okay with those fancy-dancy upgrades maybe getting damaged?
Right. I mean, like, for example, in our home, we have wood floor and we have a swimming pool. And the wood floor goes throughout pretty much the whole downstairs, so the kids run in and out. But we trained our kids to dry their feet before coming in. Same thing in the kitchen and in the bathrooms is the wood floor. So what kind of upgrades do you have that could potentially get ruined? Do you have wood floors, or do you have like a luxury vinyl planking that's great with a swimming pool that tenants could, run in and out with a pool and you wouldn't have to be worried about it getting wet or damaged? And that's just an example of a type of upgrade that you'd want to think about.
Another thing to consider is the condition of the systems of the home. If you've lived with an AC that doesn't work or a faucet that drips, just know that it's a different situation when you're the landlord.
Oh, sure. Let's tell our air conditioning story. Oh, my.
So back when we moved from our first condo to our first home, we rented it out, and the tenant called as temperatures rose and said, hey, the AC doesn't work. We didn't have AC.
No, we did not.
So
windows open, nice breeze.
We disclosed that, but he didn't pay attention. So when his renewal came up, he's like, I'm out of here, I like my AC. Next tenant moved in, same thing. As temperatures rose, they're like, hey, the AC doesn't work, it's blowing hot air. It's like, well, you turn on the heat.
Sure, and I mean, as an owner, you're like, hey, that's no problem. We'd go out to the swimming pool because it was our first little condo that we had. But as a tenant, they want to crank up the air.
Sure, so we ended up putting in the AC unit to keep the tenant. Instead of moving out in a year, they stayed for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. So things like that, you're gonna have to maintain and maintain remotely. You're not gonna be there to see a roof leak or something break or a water leak. So you've gotta really keep in mind, you've gotta do this remotely.
Okay, so remotely, yes, funny, again, when we were landlords, our tenants named Jim Schneider. Some of you might be too young to know that film or that TV show, but Schneider always walked in with his little toolbox to fix everything. So he was Schneider. But what happens if you as an owner really don't want to deal with that, Jim? I just want to lease the house out. I'm going to move to Wichita, Kansas or something for a few years, and I want somebody to deal with it.
Sure, and we've had all parts of the spectrum in our clients. So some are very hands-on, maybe they're close by, they can do all those repairs themselves. But some don't want to deal with it, so they get what's called a property manager. Yes, that costs money, but it takes the burden of a leaky toilet in the middle of the night or a furnace that goes out or anything like that, puts that on the property manager. Figure probably 8 to 10% of your monthly rent is going to the property manager, but they can then take care of everything. We even have clients whose property manager pays their HOA, pays their mortgage, does everything. All they do is get a net check at the end of every month.
Yep.
And so that's an option that you can consider.
Well, it's a real ease of mind, really, because you don't get those phone calls that something's happening potentially in the middle of the night because that property manager is dealing with it. So it is ease of mind. But again, that goes back to the financial situation. Do you want a property manager? Does this net you out? Is this a financial plus for you to do this?
Right. Speaking of finances, that is one thing to consider. We're not accountants, but talk to your accountant in terms of capital gains.
Yes.
As a married couple, you may have heard that you get a $500,000 capital gain exclusion. Basically, if you bought the house for $500,000, sold it for $1 million, that $500,000 of capital gains, $250,000 if you're single, can be excluded so you don't pay income taxes on that gain. Now, to qualify for that, you have to have lived in the house 2 of the last 5 years. So if you move out for 2 or 3 years, in theory, you could still sell the home and get that $500,000 gain. But if you rent it out 4 or more years, then you would lose that $500,000 exclusion from income tax or capital gains. One caveat, you can actually move back into the rental for 2 years and recapture that as your primary residence and recapture that capital gain.
Just know you need to really probably look at that, roadmap it, see where your life is going. If you think you might move back in or might not move back in, and what would you do if you had it for more than the 2 years with that capital gains. We have had clients that tried to game the system, moved from South Orange County out to like the Temecula area and thought that they were gonna, win this whole financial game, and it really ended up being a shambles for them.
Yep, they kind of shot themselves in the foot due to lack of planning. They hadn't consulted with us. So in their case, they didn't understand, they didn't present to us what they were thinking of doing, so we weren't able to give them any advice. Ended up shooting themselves in the foot.
Sure, because they thought they could just go and then not get impacted by not living in the house. So you really gotta lay yourself a little bit of a roadmap so you know what you're doing when you're getting into these situations.
Another thing to talk to your accountant about is once it goes from a primary residence to an investment, the tax code is going to start impacting the home differently. It's going to depreciate values. That is going to potentially increase your gain. All of those things need to factor in, and that's why you want to have a good conversation with your accountant and see, is it appropriate for you?
That's right.
We've had clients that they've said nope because of this, this, and this, and other times they said yes, but make sure you do this, this, and that.
Right.
Great conversation to have to make sure you're making the right decision.
Yes, road mapping and strategy is key here, guys.
Another thing to keep in mind is it seems like the majority of tenants have pets.
Yeah, furry friends.
So you have to decide, are you comfortable with other pets in your home? And that's going to come into the finishes, the flooring, the baseboards.
Right.
Baseboards, for some reason, are appetizing for some pets.
They do seem to be little chew marks on them.
And you have to keep in mind that the majority of your applications are going to have a pet. And are you okay with that? Under the new California laws, there's certain things you can do on deposits, but if you're a bigger investor, you're handcuffed to not having a pet deposit.
Right, and then you have to think, well, what could happen when they move out? Like Jim said, baseboards, if there's carpet in the home and a pet decides to piddle in there or something like that, upon move out, then you're going to have to replace those things.
Another thing to factor in is if you have a private pool or spa, then there's the safety and liability issues surrounding that. If they happen to have small kids or even visitors and friends that come over, you have to be sensitive to that. You might need to change your insurance picture so that you have liability coverage, maybe an umbrella to protect yourself.
Sure. So net, there's a few things to look at, and really, again, getting your strategy and your roadmap and not just jumping off a cliff is so important in this situation.
If any of those things sound like a roadblock or something you go, I don't want to deal with that, then you might want to consider selling if you don't want to be a landlord. But there are some advantages to it, so if you want to look at your options, give us a call. We can help you navigate.
Sure, and different times call for different decisions. So give us a call. I'm Vickie.
And I'm Jim, and we're with the Bishop team, your leading realtors here in Orange County, California.
Talk to you soon.